I'll never forget when my parents left me in New York. No, this is not a Home Alone 2 story. I was 6 years old, and my parents thought since I adored my cousin and was having a great time, why not extend my visit and leave me there to be with my aunt and my uncle and my cousins? To this day, all I can remember is that by the second night, the pit in my stomach turned into a flood of tears, and I was on the phone with my mom, begging her to come get me. I tried to explain to my mom that my aunt's hugs just didn't feel like home, and that I needed my mom to come and bring me my home, her arms, immediately. Well, it worked. My dad drove up from Jersey the next day, and I was back home with my mom within 24 hours. Perhaps you can recall a time of being homesick, of going to sleepaway camp as a kid, or moving to a new country as an adult, or having a loved one go on a long trip or sadly pass away. A feeling of just wanting to get back to that place, that person that you knew in your bones as home. Whatever the deeply comforting and nurturing sense of home is for you, it is a place we were created to long for. The season of Lent gets us in touch with our longing for home and invites us to take the journey to go there. In Lent, the home that we long for is our ultimate home in God. Lent helps us to get in touch with our longings for our home in God. As Christians, we know that our ultimate home is in God. God is the home that we came from, the home that we will return to. On Ash Wednesday, the priest reminded us of this truth when they put ash on our foreheads and the sign of the cross and said, "From dust you came, and to dust you shall return." The invitation to go home to God and the promise to find our ultimate home in God is peppered throughout Holy Scriptures. Upon preparing to face the events of Holy Week, which we are nearing, Jesus talks with his disciples, and he, in this farewell discourse, tells them, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwellings," or homes, if you like. Jesus goes on to say, "If it were not so, I would not go to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you could be also." And we know that these dwellings, this home, isn't limited to the afterlife. We get to enjoy it in our lifetime. In this conversation where Jesus is preparing his disciples for his departure, he reminds them not to lose heart at the suffering that they will witness, at the appalling injustices of the world, or how the story of their lives may seem to end, but to hold out hope that Jesus has made a home for them, that Jesus will be journeying alongside them in this life as well in the life to come. And Jesus extends that same invitation to us today. He invites us to make our home in him. We're invited to live from a deep sense of connection with Christ, to abide in this dwelling place, this home, who, as St. Paul once wrote, is the one we live and move and have our being. And knowing that this life is full of joy and hardship, knowing that we humans are prone to get distracted and busy and to lose hope and perspective, the Christian calendar offers us an annual invitation to come back home to God in Lent. We follow Jesus into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. Here, we realign our values and our priorities. We begin to see more clearly what matters most in life as we renew our relationship with God. And the spiritual diet we might take up during Lent of praying, fasting, giving, making our confession is all meant to help us come back home, to return home to God's vision by lamenting the brokenness of our world, to return home to trusting God, who is our mediator and advocate, to return to depending on God, who gives us manna in the wilderness, the bread of life, as our opening collect put it, to return to trusting in God, who is the cloud that will lead us by day and the pillar of fire that will lead us by night. The journey of coming home to God and then to ourselves, our truest God-given sense of self and others, is at a high level what the story of the prodigal son is all about. If you zoom out, the story of the prodigal son is God's vision for humanity's return back home to God, our truest sense of self and to one another. God's vision for humanity's return home is through the embrace of reconciliation, through sending his son Jesus Christ to die on the cross, paving a way home to God now and in the age to come. And while the story of homecoming is inspiring, as we zoom in, we quickly see how hard it is to keep this vision in perspective. And that is because hearing the parable of the prodigal son is like watching a really juicy reality TV show. We immediately get sucked in and quickly lose the narrative thread because of all the messiness of our human vulnerabilities. The story is all too relatable. Who here hasn't judged like the righteous brother judged? Who here hasn't prayed like the father and forgiven the son like the father in the story? Who here hasn't felt homesick when we've wandered off a little too far like the prodigal son? And even who here among us who may not watch telenovelas in our spare time hasn't borne witness to these family dynamics as we, like those asked, to prepare this homecoming feast? The good news for those of us who cannot help but get caught up in the details of the story is that God is with us, working through our common confusion and the messiness of this journey back home to God. If we keep it at a high level, we see God's hope for all of us as individuals and a wider human family to come home to God, to this restored relationship. We get a glimpse into God's kingdom in this parable. Heaven looks like one big homecoming party where all the sinners and saints gather around the throne in celebration. Heaven looks like Democrats and Republicans all in the same room, partying in their love of God. Heaven looks like you and that person you can't stand, all in the same room, partying around the throne of God, giving thanks for God's grace and forgiveness in your life. Heaven breaks into earth each time, in some way, we go home to God, collectively or individually. In the thick of our own lives, amid the messiness dropped in the middle of the wilderness of Lent, it's important to remember stories like the prodigal son as a source of hope for God's vision for humanity's homecoming. While we may not witness the full realization of God's vision in our lifetime, God's promise and invitation for reconciliation remains. Sometimes our stories of homecoming will be marked with scars. Throughout the season of Lent, we have been using one of these stories that have been marked with scars in the litany for reconciliation that's in your leaflet. We've been praying this litany each and every Sunday during Lent. And the litany comes from Coventry Cathedral, which you may recall from the fall as we brought in Dr. David Porter to talk about that ministry. The cathedral in Coventry was bombed out during World War II and afterwards became a center for reconciliation and peace. In 1962, they established a ministry of reconciliation and invited other Christian communities to join what they called the Cross of Nails. This cathedral ministry promotes healing between enemies and fosters international understanding. Through prayer, dialogue, and outreach, the ministry has been dedicated to overcoming these divisions and advocating for forgiveness and reconciliation, reminding us all that despite the realities we may bear witness to, that God's vision for reconciliation is always possible. Friends, this morning, I wonder, how might you be longing for home? How might the wilderness of your life, the messiness of the story of the prodigal son, be surfacing your longing for your ultimate home? It's okay to feel homesick. All that means is that we know that God's goodness cannot be replaced by anyone or anything in this world. And while we may not be able to pick up the phone and call God like I did my mom, God is just one prayer away from bringing us back home to her loving arms now and in the age to come. So friends, let us go to our mother's arms. Amen.